Welcome to MedAxiom HeartTalk, the podcast where cardiovascular thought leaders come together for one ultimate goal: to continually advance cardiovascular health care for all. MedAxiom HeartTalk starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm Joel Sauer, one of the consultants with MedAxiom, and I'm joined this afternoon by Dr. Ed Fry, who is the Chair of Cardiovascular Medicine at St. Vincent Health in Indiana, but also National Chair of Ascension Cardiovascular Services for the entire country. So welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
Our topic today is the Quadruple Aim, because we found that a triple aim just wasn't complicated enough. We had to add the fourth rail, which has to do with provider engagement and satisfaction, but also that of our care teams. And I know Ascension Health and St. Vincent in particular have put a lot of resources around that. Do you want to describe that for us?
Yeah, I think we've been very fortunate and are proud of the fact that very early on, as this topic became really brought to a fore around some of the discussion of physician burnout and provider care team burnout, that this became a focus of our national leadership, our regional leadership, and also at the local level in terms of practice operations. And so much of it has to do with really defining what are the components of the Quadruple Aim. It's more than just sort of satisfaction. It has to do with the issue of engagement, as you just mentioned, and really creating a place where everybody can feel like they are contributing to an overall process and have shared goals. And it's so important, and I think our system and our leadership and other members of the care team beyond the physician staff have recognized that this is really key to be able to execute and accomplish the other aspects of the Quadruple Aim: access, better outcomes, better utilization of resources.
So, two-part question. One, what do you do specifically to engender engagement, as you put it, and to get people involved in the process?
Well, a couple of things. I think one of the interesting things that happened with integration, at least looking at it at a 30,000-foot national level, is a change in the relationship of the provider to the overall organization. I think there was a lot of people who quickly fell into a sort of a following mode or an employee type of mode, and they inherently became somewhat disengaged from decision-making, strategy, operations, and that very much set the stage for having a sense that they were not connected, they were not part of the bigger entity. I think what we've been able to do, hopefully successfully, has been to try and maintain those aspects of what was private practice in terms of people having responsibilities and accountabilities to various aspects of what we do. And we really built that around the quality piece, having a very broad and well-developed quality infrastructure and putting people in place in each of those areas. We don't have just one sort of quality officer who deals with all of that. We've really driven it down to the sub-specialty areas, and I think people have a sense of ownership related to those things, and that helps engender the engagement and hopefully mitigate some of the burnout aspects.
So with 100 providers, I mean, that's a big team, and I'll just use an example. I'm one of 25 non-invasive cardiologists. How do you engage that many? Is everyone participating at some level on some form of quality improvement or performance improvement?
No, and that has to be okay as well. But I think that type of person who has decided themselves not to engage, that may be a better place for them to be than feel like they're being forced to engage, and that may inherently still meet their personal needs in terms of the satisfaction, the experience of their job and the care that they deliver, that may be fine for them. So it is, I think, self-selective. There certainly is some generational aspect to that. Those who maybe have not traditionally been involved in practice leadership and are near the ends of their career, their expectations and desires are very different. And so what constitutes satisfaction for them is very different than the person right out of training who's gung-ho and wants to, tackle the world. Their expectations are very different.
And you don't find that population are kind of inherently in the way of change without that engagement?
Well, I think that then becomes a product of your recruitment strategies and your onboarding and your expectations.
And your culture.
Yeah, and your culture. And I think that the millennials often get a bad rap, and a lot of it is, goes back to, when I went to school, I had to walk 20 miles through the snow, et cetera, et cetera.
Uphill, both ways.
No, I mean, I find, and having contact through a fellowship program and experiences through ACC, am constantly amazed and impressed with the quality, the inquisitiveness, the energy of the new people coming out.
I actually find having kids in that generation, they have the balance appropriate. They have the expectation on the lifestyle side, but also on what that means professionally to them.
Yeah, and the whole experience is less fearful for them. I mean, obviously, I would say technology is one of the biggest fear factors for many.
It's also a burnout factor.
It's a huge burnout factor. But for those coming out of training, it's just that's the way that we do things, and so it's a non-issue.
A way of life.
Yeah, exactly.
Come out of the womb with an iPad now.
Right. I mean, it'd be wonderful to fast forward 10, 15 years from now and see what the conversations are like.
They will be very different, I would predict that. Now, I also understand that in terms of that engagement, you have some formal survey data that you guys do with your physicians or not?
Well, we try to sit down every year and we give people, all the providers, 100 cardiologists in our Indiana practice, a self-evaluation, which then is the springboard for a face-to-face conversation with, typically we do it with 2 members of the leadership group, and go over their successes for the year, their plans for the upcoming year, what they have found to be good about the practice, what they find to be challenging and frustrating, and give them an opportunity to voice suggestions in terms of how those things can change for the better.
Have you been able to see a difference at the patient side, bedside, or exam table from these initiatives to kind of keep your physicians and care teams engaged?
Yeah. Well, I would say that probably because it's infective, I would say probably the best measure of that is in our cardiovascular specific hospital setting, which is a big part of our practice. Very, very high HCAP scores, and the specific questions related to, the doctor listened to me, the communication skills related to the physician and the other members of the care team all have been very high. So I would use that as a reflection of that being successful, because probably the first thing to go when somebody is burnt out is disinterest, apathy. The patient becomes a bother as opposed to part of the care process.
Yeah, for sure. And we just heard how critically important patient satisfaction and their engagement is, and that speaks to that. So I thank you very much, Ed, for the great conversation. And
thanks for having me.
Look forward to more in the future.
Sure.
You've been listening to MedAxiom HeartTalk, the podcast where cardiovascular thought leaders come together to advance healthcare. You can follow MedAxiom on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. If you haven't yet, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another MedAxiom HeartTalk, and thanks for listening.